Before I start another one of these glorified rants that we call episodes, um, I have been a certified personal trainer and nutritionist since I was 20, and I hesitate to lead with that because certifications don't mean what people think they mean. I don't think they ever have. Sometimes they mean someone has studied anatomy, programming, nutrition, and basic safety. Other times it means someone completed an online course over a weekend and now they believe blueberries are making men infertile or something. We're living in the age of bro science, influencer wellness, peptides, carnivore diets, seed oil tribunals, and also people who think walking barefoot for 11 minutes has given them access to some ancient masculine knowledge. Yes, this is an actual thing. So take the certifications for whatever they're worth. I think what matters more to me is what I've seen in actual human beings, in actual people. I've worked with meditation clients, therapy clients, friends, athletes, beginners, people who are physically capable but mentally exhausted, and people who had so little confidence in themselves that even the idea of starting a routine felt like another chance to fail. One of the weirdest things I've learned is that one push-up a day can make a huge difference. I mean literally one, not one set. Not one push-up on the first day before adding another every morning until you're doing 1,000 push-ups while David Goggins plays in the background. One push-up, then you stop. I think the second part is where people get confused. Most people hear one push-up a day and usually immediately start negotiating against it. They usually tell me one is too easy, it won't build that much muscle, it barely counts as exercise. If they're already on the floor, they might as well do 10. If they can do 10, why not 20? Surely more effort means more progress. I think that reaction shows you the entire problem. We aren't good at doing small things. At least I'm not. But more specifically, we're not good at doing small things without turning them into larger things. More impressive ones, or things that can be used as evidence we're finding a worthwhile person. A single push-up feels insulting because it doesn't satisfy the ego. Usually, you can't really brag about it. Nobody wants to post a sweaty progress pic after completing exactly one push-up. You're not going to collapse on the floor, stare into the camera, and explain that nobody understands how hard you work. It's almost impossible to make a single push-up cinematic. I think that's why I like it so much. The purpose isn't primarily exercise, at least not at first. The push-up is simply the physical location where other deeper skills are being trained. You're practicing consistency, but you're also practicing restraint. You're learning to keep a promise when the promise is so small that your mind can't justify avoiding it. You're building physical strength in tiny amounts, while also developing the belief that repeated action can matter long before the results are actually visible. I don't know if you see it, but there's faith in that. I hope you don't think I'm saying one push-up is a religious ritual. We don't need a push-up cult. What I mean is that whenever you commit to a small action whose future value cannot yet be seen, you're practicing a basic form of faith. You are behaving as though something invisible is being built. That's really hard for modern people because we've become addicted to immediate proof. We want the result before we trust the process. We want to feel motivated before we begin. We want the body to change quickly enough that the discomfort seems justified. We want numbers, pictures, measurements, praise, and reassurance that our effort is not being wasted. One push-up gives you almost none of that. After 3 days, you'll probably look exactly the same. After a week, no one will stop you in public and ask you about your training program. You may not feel stronger. You might not even become better at push-ups in any dramatic way. What you're starting to change is your relationship with action. Most people I know have made enormous promises to themselves. They're going to lose 50 pounds, stop eating sugar, meditate for an hour every morning, read a book every week, fix their sleep, become financially responsible, start praying regularly, delete the app, forgive their parents, launch a business, and somehow drink 3 liters of water while doing all of it. This new life usually begins on Monday. By Wednesday, they're eating something over the sink, watching a video called "Why Discipline is More Important Than Motivation." It looks like laziness, but often the promise was too large for the person making it. It came from fantasy rather than relationship. You imagine the future version of yourself as someone who has none of your current limitations. That person loves exercise, prepares every meal, they can wake up before dawn, they never become depressed, they don't get distracted, and apparently they have no job, family, chronic pain, laundry, or need to sit down at all really. Then, the real you is expected to follow the imaginary person's schedule. Of course it collapses. One push-up is different because it meets you where you actually are. It takes a few seconds. You don't need a gym membership or special clothing. You don't need to feel particularly inspired. Unless a push-up is unsafe or physically inaccessible for you, there's almost no logistical reason that it can't happen. And if a traditional push-up doesn't work for your body, choose another movement. Put your hands against the wall. Sit down and stand up once from a chair. Raise your arms overhead. Walk to the end of the driveway. The exact movement isn't sacred. The structure itself is the point. Pick something small enough that failure becomes almost ridiculous. Then perform it every day. You might be surprised by how much resistance still appears. The mind will say you can do it later. It will question whether it matters. It'll tell you that one repetition is pointless and suggest that you start a real program next month. It may even argue that doing nothing is more honest than doing something so small. The mind will say you can do it later. That's when the experiment becomes interesting, because now you can see that the problem was never the physical difficulty. The problem is that some part of us hates humble beginnings, and we would rather do something heroic for 3 days than something ordinary for 3 months. Heroic effort makes us feel transformed immediately. Trust me, I know, I'm obsessed with it. A tiny habit does not give us that emotional reward. It asks us to live without the feeling of being impressive. There's a spiritual lesson there that goes way beyond fitness. People often think discipline means forcing yourself to do more. In reality, discipline also includes stopping. If the agreement is 1 push-up, just do 1. Your ego will probably tell you to continue, especially on the days when you feel strong. Doing 20 will feel more virtuous. You may even think that doing 20 will feel more virtuous. You may even think you're proving that the method is working. But the challenge isn't to find your maximum. The challenge is to respect the boundary that we've created. This is really important because many people only understand 2 settings: nothing and excess. I'm one of those people. We ignore our bodies for months and then decide to train 6 days a week. We eat without attention and then begin a diet so restrictive that a banana becomes morally complicated. We never meditate and then attempt a silent retreat in our bedroom while our family wonders why the door is locked. I think we're attracted to extremes because extremes remove the need for discernment. If the rule is do as much as possible, you never have to listen, you just push. If the rule is do nothing, you also avoid listening. One push-up places you in the uncomfortable middle. You act and then you leave. That restraint creates trust. A lot of people don't trust themselves because they've spent years making promises during emotional highs and breaking them when ordinary life returns. Each failed promise becomes evidence. Eventually, they stop believing their own intentions. They say, "I'm gonna start working out," and somewhere inside, a voice responds, "No, you're not." That may sound negative, but it has a memory. It remembers the unused gym memberships, the meal plans abandoned after 4 days, the meditation apps downloaded and forgotten, the running shoes that became something you just see around the house. That trust usually isn't rebuilt through another grand declaration. You can rebuild it by giving yourself evidence. One push-up today, another tomorrow. A week passes, then 2. The action is almost laughably small, but something inside you begins to register that you're doing what you said you would do. And that's way more important than people realize. Self-belief is often discussed as though it's a feeling you generate through affirmations. Like if you stare into a mirror and announce that you're powerful, disciplined, and magnetic, something happens. Something happens. There's nothing inherently wrong with encouraging yourself, but belief becomes much more stable when it's attached to evidence. Usually, you trust the friend who consistently shows up. Eventually, you can become that friend to yourself. This is one thing I've noticed with meditation clients and people close to me. When someone begins establishing even a tiny relationship with consistency, it starts leaking into other areas of life. The push-up itself remains small, but the identity around it changes. People start thinking, "I'm someone who does this every day." That sentence might sound insignificant to you, but I don't think it is. A person who believes they can act consistently may become more willing to meditate for 2 minutes. They might drink water in the morning, answer the email they've avoided, take their medication on time, go for a short walk, or stop letting laundry get in the way of their destiny. The original action creates a small opening in the story they've been telling about themselves. Maybe I'm not capable of discipline. Maybe change doesn't need to begin with self-hatred. Maybe I can build something without becoming obsessed with it. Maybe I've been trying to prove too much too quickly. The push-up becomes a little piece of absurd evidence against hopelessness. I say absurd because, from the outside, the whole thing looks silly. Nobody believes one push-up can change a life, and that's probably part of why it can. The belief isn't attached to an impressive action. It's just attached to a principle that tiny efforts, repeated with sincerity, accumulate in ways we can't fully predict. This idea appears everywhere in life. A relationship is not usually saved by one enormous conversation. It changes through tone, patience, honesty, and hundreds of small choices. A spiritual practice is not built entirely through rare, mystical experiences. It develops through returning, usually on days when nothing profound happens. A child does not learn that a parent is safe because of one dramatic speech. They learn through repeated contact with someone who behaves reliably. Strength works the same way. We like to imagine change as a breakthrough, but most change is accumulation. One push-up does not seem important because we're evaluating it as an isolated event. Of course, one push-up will not transform your body. We already know that. One brick will not become a house either, but that's not an argument against bricks. I think what you should be asking is, what happens when an action becomes part of the architecture of your life? Now, there is an obvious objection here. Wouldn't someone eventually need to do more than one push-up to gain meaningful physical strength? Yes, probably. But the word eventually is doing important work in that sentence. We didn't show up here with our first goal being optimization. We are trying to establish continuity. Most fitness programs are designed around what would produce the best result if followed consistently. That sounds sensible, but it ignores the fact that many people don't yet possess the psychological structure required to follow them consistently. The perfect program, performed for 6 days, is often less useful than the ridiculous program maintained for 6 months. One push-up creates a floor. It is the minimum that remains when motivation disappears, when life becomes chaotic, when your mood drops or you travel or get busy, or you simply don't feel like being the kind of person who works out. A good floor prevents you from returning to zero. This is something I wish more people understood about physical and mental health. Progress is not always about raising the ceiling. Sometimes you need to raise the floor. Your best day is not the most accurate measure of your life. Your worst or most ordinary days tell us much more. Anyone can train hard when they're excited. What happens on the day when you feel nothing? Can you still do the smallest version? Question has helped people I know far more than another burst of motivation. There may come a day when the person doing one push-up wants to do more. Fine. That desire is not the enemy. The key is understanding why the original limitation existed. You were learning not to feed every impulse. You were protecting the habit from your own enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is often treated as an unquestioned good, but it can destroy consistency. People become excited, increase the difficulty too quickly, create expectations they can't maintain, and then they feel ashamed when their energy returns to normal. Restraint allows the practice to survive excitement. You can create a separate workout if you want. Go train properly, lift weights, run, practice martial arts. Do a sensible program. The one push-up can remain its own ritual. We're not talking about a workout. This is more like a daily vote for continuity. You are reminding yourself that meaningful things can begin beneath the threshold of drama. You're showing the nervous system that action doesn't always lead to pain, humiliation, exhaustion, or failure. This last point is really important for people who associate fitness with punishment. Many people grew up hating exercise because movement was presented as correction. Coaches humiliated them. Parents criticized their weight. Gym class made them feel exposed. Fitness became connected to shame long before they had the chance to discover what strength or movement actually felt like. Telling that person to go hard may confirm everything they already fear. 1. Gentle repetition offers a different relationship. The body does something difficult enough to count, but easy enough to survive without dread. Tomorrow, it happens again. Over time, the movement becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces fear. And reduce fear? That's what creates room for curiosity. What happens if I adjust my hand position? Can I lower myself more slowly? Am I getting stronger? Do I want to try too? That curiosity is healthier than coercion. The body responds better when it's not constantly being threatened by the person living inside it. There's also this weird kind of humility in performing a tiny action every day without knowing exactly what it will become, kind of like I'm doing with this podcast. This is where I return to faith. Faith isn't always a grand emotional certainty. Sometimes it looks more like participation without proof. You act in accordance with something you cannot yet see. That action itself is a statement. It says that you believe consistency has value even before the result arrives. That principle, at least in my life and experience, applies to prayer, meditation, therapy, parenting, writing, recovery, and almost every worthwhile process I can think of. You usually don't know which day mattered. Was it the 7th push-up? The 100th? The day you nearly forgot but got out of bed and did it anyway? Was it the first time you realized the action had become normal? There might be no single moment. Eventually, you simply become someone who has been keeping a promise for a long time. And that can feel shocking, especially if you began as someone who believed they couldn't trust themselves. The physical results can become surprising too. One daily push-up may naturally improve. Your form becomes smoother, and the movement stops feeling foreign. Perhaps you add another habit, or begin a real training program because the barrier between you and exercise has weakened. Even if the original push-up does not produce a dramatic transformation by itself, it may create the person capable of producing one. That distinction is at the heart of this whole discussion. A lot of advice focuses on the result of an action. How many calories does it burn? How much muscle can I build? Is this the most efficient exercise? What does the research say about volume and frequency? Those are reasonable questions in the correct context, but human beings aren't spreadsheets. Sometimes the greatest value of an action is the person it trains you to become. The push-up trains someone who returns, someone who can tolerate smallness, someone who understands that stopping can require as much discipline as continuing, someone who no longer needs every healthy action to create an immediate emotional reward. That person is much more dangerous to their old patterns than someone temporarily possessed by motivation. This is why I think wellness culture gets so much wrong. It constantly introduces new things, new supplements, routines, rules, devices, new reasons to believe your body is failing because you haven't ordered the right powder from Amazon yet. The answer is often much less exciting. Choose one simple behavior and remain in relationship with it long enough for it to teach you something. Don't ask it to entertain you or demand that it transform your appearance by next month. Let the action be small. Let it be slightly stupid, and let other people underestimate it. You're not performing it for them anyway. There's freedom in having a practice too unimpressive to turn into content. No transformation montage or public challenge. No announcement that you're entering your disciplined era. Do the push-up and continue with your day. That privacy protects the sincerity of the act. Some things grow better before they're named. I also have to watch myself and not turn one push-up into another universal wellness commandment. All bodies are different, and someone with an injury, chronic pain, a disability, or a medical condition might need another movement or a completely different practice. The sacred part isn't the push-up. The sacred part is the promise you make. It could be 1 minute of meditation, one line in a journal, one trip outside, one glass of water after waking up, one slow breath before opening your phone, or a single page of a book. The principle remains the same. Make the action small enough to survive the worst version of your ordinary day. Then resist the urge to make it impressive. You may discover that the limitation itself is doing important work. When you stop after one push-up, you're telling the greedy part of the mind that it doesn't control the process. You're refusing to turn every beginning into a performance, and you're practicing enoughness in a culture that's built around wanting more. That's not laziness. It might just be the first time you're training intelligently. A person who can do one push-up every day for a year has learned something that a person who does 100 once and quits has not. They've learned how to continue. Continuation is not glamorous, but it is responsible for nearly everything we admire after it's finished. The book was written one sitting at a time. The body you admire was built one workout at a time. The relationship that impresses you survived through thousands of small repairs. The spiritual life deepened through ordinary returns. The mystic's spiritual life deepened through ordinary returns that nobody witnessed. We notice the finished structure and forget the days when it looked like almost nothing. So try it. Choose a movement you can safely perform. Do one repetition every day, preferably at the same point in your routine. You might connect it to brushing your teeth, waking up, prayer, or getting ready for bed. You don't have to wait for motivation or add a dramatic playlist. You don't have to buy a shirt. For the first stage, you just have to do a push-up and stop after one. Pay attention to what comes up. Notice the impatience, the skepticism, the desire to do more, and the strange embarrassment of taking something so small so seriously. That's the material. The push-up is just helping you see it. After enough days, you may realize you've been learning consistency, restraint, patience, self-trust, and faith in accumulation. Your chest and arms might become stronger too, which is nice. But the more important result may be that you no longer believe change has to arrive through force. Sometimes a life begins shifting because someone made a tiny promise and finally kept it. One push-up, then stop. Come back tomorrow.